You ever have that gut feeling? The one that starts out as just a whisper, like something's off, but you can't quite put your finger on it? Yeah, that was me with Alice. On the outside, we looked like the perfect couple. Hell, I thought we were. We had been together for years, built this life together, shared everything, or so I thought. But man, looking back now, I realize how blind I was. It all started small, like these subtle shifts in the way she acted. At first, it didn't bother me. I mean, we all go through phases, right? She started staying late at work, talking about these new trainings, conferences, meetings, things that in hindsight she never used to mention before. I remember asking her one evening, "Why the sudden workload? You've never been this swamped." She brushed it off, said something about career growth, and I let it go. Stupid, I know. I'll never forget the night it really hit me. I was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels, and Alice came home later than usual. She was wearing this new dress, something way too fancy for a supposed business dinner. Her hair was done differently, a little more effort than she usually put in, like she was trying to impress someone. I joked, "What, are you trying to catch someone's eye at the office or something?" She laughed it off, but I caught that flicker in her eyes, that look that said I'd hit closer to the truth than either of us wanted to admit. And it wasn't just the late nights or the new clothes. She started acting distant, like she had these new interests that didn't involve me. We used to do everything together, but now it felt like she was off in her own world. I remember her mentioning some fitness center she joined. I wasn't against it, figured she just wanted to stay in shape, but then she started going more often, and when I asked if I could join her sometime, she'd shut that down real quick. "It's just me time," she'd say. "Me time, huh? Whatever." Then there were the receipts. God, I'll never forget finding those. One day, she left her purse on the kitchen counter. I wasn't snooping, at least, not intentionally, but I was cleaning up and her purse tipped over. Out spilled a bunch of receipts from restaurants I'd never heard of. Fancy places, too. Now, don't get me wrong, Alice has always had expensive tastes, but she never mentioned these dinners. I asked her about it later, casually like, "Hey, I found this receipt for that new restaurant downtown. How was it?" She didn't even flinch, just mumbled something about a work dinner and walked off. That's when it hit me. She was hiding something. We started spending less time together. It wasn't like we stopped talking altogether, but our conversations got shorter, more forced. I'd ask her how her day was, and she'd give me these one-word answers, then disappear into the bedroom or head out for one of her evening runs. Yeah, evening runs, my ass. Michael, my best friend, noticed it too. One night, we were having a few beers, and he brought it up. "Hey man, everything all right with you and Alice? You've been off lately." I shrugged it off, just like I'd been doing with everything else. But he pushed. "Come on, dude. I've known you long enough to tell when something's bothering you." I hesitated, but then it all came spilling out. How she was distant, how she'd been staying late at work, how she had these new clothes, new routines, and it just didn't feel right. Michael leaned back, took a long sip of his beer, and said, "Man, you gotta look into that. It doesn't sound good." And that's when it really hit me. My best friend was seeing what I refused to see. Something was going on, and I needed to figure it out. The worst part? She wasn't even trying that hard to cover her tracks. There were nights she'd come home late, looking exhausted, but it wasn't the kind of tired you get from a long day at the office. It was that other kind of tired, the kind that comes from a long night with someone who isn't your husband. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to believe that maybe I was just being paranoid, that I was overthinking everything, but deep down I knew. I just wasn't ready to face it yet. Then came the conferences. These random out-of-town trips she suddenly had to go on. It was like every other week, she had some training or networking event she had to attend alone. "Can I come with you? Make a weekend out of it?" I'd ask. She'd laugh it off, tell me it was work only, and there wouldn't be time for fun. But come on, who was she kidding? I'm not an idiot. Something was going on, and I needed to figure out what it was before it drove me insane. And then, of course, the nights out. It used to be that we'd go out together, grab dinner, maybe catch a movie. But those nights became fewer and farther between. Now, she was going out without me, saying it was girls' night, or she was meeting some co-workers for drinks. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then it became this regular thing. Too regular. Every week, she was out late, and I was home alone, sitting there wondering what the hell was happening to my marriage. I'd confront her sometimes, but it always ended the same. "You're being ridiculous," she'd say, or "Why don't you trust me?" She'd make it seem like I was the problem, like I was some insecure asshole for even questioning her. And every time I'd back down, let it go. But the doubt, that never went away. So here I was, a guy who thought he had it all. A great wife, a stable life, and suddenly everything felt like it was slipping away. And the worst part? I wasn't even sure how much of it was real anymore. After a few more weeks of feeling like I was losing my mind, I couldn't take it anymore. Something was off with Alice. And it wasn't just the late nights and the new clothes. It was the way she was with me. Cold, distant, almost like I was just a roommate to her now. No more affection, no more late-night talks in bed, no more anything. It had all dried up like she'd just turned off a switch. I couldn't help it. I started snooping. I hated myself for it, but what choice did I have? The woman I married was slipping away, and I needed to know why. So, one night while she was in the shower, I grabbed her phone. Just a quick look, I told myself. But what I found? Jesus. That's when everything crashed. There it was, a message thread buried under some stupid work contact, some guy named Jamie. At first, I thought it was just another colleague, no big deal, but then I scrolled up. And what I saw, I couldn't unsee. The messages weren't work-related. Not even close. They were flirty, playful at first, but then as I kept scrolling, they got graphic. Real graphic. I could feel my hands shaking as I read through their plans to meet up, the late-night chats about how she couldn't wait to see him again, and the photos. Yeah, there were photos of both of them. Alice in lingerie, Jamie with his shirt off, flexing like some 20-something gym rat. I wanted to throw up, but instead of losing my shit right then and there, I did something I never thought I'd do. I took a deep breath, saved the messages, and put the phone back. I didn't confront her. Not yet. That's when it hit me. I needed proof. Real proof, not just some texts. I wasn't about to go into this blind, so I did what any rational, paranoid husband would do. I installed cameras. I know. It sounds crazy, but at this point, I didn't care. I had to know for sure. So, I went out and bought a few hidden cameras and set them up around the house when she wasn't home. One in the living room, one in the kitchen, and, one in the bedroom. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed to see what was really going on when I wasn't around. The first few days, nothing. Just Alice going about her usual routine. Late nights, coming home and heading straight to bed, not even bothering to say goodnight. But then a week later, it happened. She told me she had to stay late for work again, some bullshit about a meeting with a client. I didn't believe it for a second, but I played along. I kissed her goodbye, told her to take care, and sat down in front of my laptop to watch the footage. Hours went by, and nothing. The house was empty. But then, around 9 p.m., I saw him. Jamie. The bastard walked right into my house like he owned the place. And Alice? She was right behind him, all smiles and giggles like a fucking schoolgirl. I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding out of my chest, watching them move into our bedroom. It didn't take long. They didn't even try to be discreet. Right there, in the bed we shared, she was with him. My wife was with another man. I felt sick, like physically sick. I wanted to storm in, throw them both out, scream in her face, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, frozen, watching my entire life fall apart in real time. It was like some nightmare I couldn't wake up from. After they were done, they stayed for a while because why not? Jamie left. He didn't even stay the night. Just zipped up, gave her a kiss, and walked out like it was the most normal thing in the world. And Alice? She didn't seem guilty. Not one bit. She just cleaned up, got dressed, and went back to her late-night work meeting like nothing ever happened. I couldn't believe it. The woman I'd been married to for years, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, was screwing some younger guy in our bed like it was just another Tuesday. And that's when the anger hit. I'm not talking about the kind of anger where you get mad and punch a wall or throw something. I'm talking deep, burning anger. The kind that makes your skin crawl. that gets under your bones and eats at you from the inside out. I knew right then that this wasn't just about her cheating. This was about how I was going to make her pay for what she did to me. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wasn't stupid. I needed more. I needed to destroy her. So, the next morning I started my day like nothing had happened. Alice was all smiles, kissed me on the cheek before heading out to her fitness center, which, by the way, I now knew was just an excuse to spend time with Jamie. I played along, nodded, wished her a good workout, and as soon as she was out the door, I started planning. First, I checked her phone again. More messages. They were planning a trip together. A trip. She told me it was a work conference next month, but guess what? No work involved. Just her and Jamie, off to some fancy hotel for the weekend while I stayed home like a goddamn fool. I couldn't let that happen. Not without a fight. So, I started gathering everything. Every single message, every photo, every piece of evidence I could find. I wasn't just going to sit there and let this happen. I needed to make sure that when this all came crashing down, it would burn everything to the ground. I started tracking her movements too. I set up GPS on her phone without her knowing. Watched every move she made. Every time she went to the gym. Every time she met up with Jamie. I wasn't going to miss a single second of this. The worst part? I still hadn't confronted her. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted to hurt her just as bad as she was hurting me. And trust me, I had a plan. She didn't know it yet. But the day of reckoning was coming. And when it did, there'd be no turning back. I had the proof now. I'd seen it with my own eyes. Alice and Jamie, fucking in my bed like it was theirs. And the texts, the photos, the lies. I had it all. But instead of blowing up, instead of screaming at her like I wanted to, I knew I had to play this smart. I couldn't just go off half-cocked, no matter how badly I wanted to. I needed to destroy her completely, and for that I needed time and patience. So I started gathering everything. I went back through her phone again, taking screenshots of every dirty message, every picture. I saved the videos from the hidden cameras, labeling them for safekeeping. I dug up every suspicious receipt she'd stashed in her purse and made sure I had photos of them too. Hotel bookings, fancy dinners she never mentioned. Every single one got saved. If she was going to blow up my life, I was going to blow up hers tenfold. But here's the kicker. While I was going through all of this, I found myself growing closer to someone I hadn't expected, Sarah. She's been a colleague of mine for a few years, always friendly, always nice. We never really crossed any lines before, but she'd been dropping hints for a while. And now, with all the shit going down with Alice, I found myself leaning on her more and more. It started innocently enough. We'd grab coffee after work, just talk about life, vent about work stress, nothing major. But the more time I spent with her, the more I realized how easy it was to be around her. She didn't have that cold, distant energy Alice had been throwing at me for months. Sarah listened. She cared. And yeah, she was interested in me. I could see it in her eyes, the way she'd smile when I talked, the way her hand would linger just a second too long on mine when we said goodbye. At first, I didn't want to involve her in all of this. I thought it would complicate things. But the truth is, I needed someone in my corner. Someone who wasn't just watching my life fall apart from the outside. And Sarah? She was more than willing to step up. She became my emotional crutch, my sounding board. And slowly but surely, our relationship changed. It wasn't just about coffee anymore. One night, after a few too many drinks, I told her everything. I spilled it all. The affair, the cameras, the lies. I half expected her to freak out, maybe even distance herself from me, but she didn't. If anything, she leaned in closer. "Lucas, you don't deserve this," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You deserve someone who actually cares about you, who respects you. She's trash." I won't lie, hearing someone say that out loud about Alice, it felt good, like really good. It was only a matter of time before Sarah became a part of my revenge plan. At first, it was just small things. I'd tell her about the new evidence I found, the new messages Alice and Jamie were exchanging. We'd laugh about how pathetic they were, how clueless Alice was. But as time went on, I realized that Sarah could play a bigger role in all of this. She wanted to help. And honestly, I wanted her to. Meanwhile, I kept tracking Alice's movements. I had GPS set up on her phone now, and I could see where she was at any given moment. Turns out Jamie wasn't just some fling. They were seeing each other regularly. At the gym, at the same restaurants, at his place. I learned their patterns, figured out when and where they met. It was like a twisted game of cat and mouse, and I was determined to come out on top. There were a few close calls, though. Awkward encounters that made me want to punch Jamie's smug face. Once, I ran into him at the gym. I wasn't expecting it, but there he was, lifting weights like he didn't have a care in the world. He didn't recognize me, of course, but I sure as hell knew who he was. Watching him joke around with his buddies while he was screwing my wife behind my back, it took every ounce of restraint not to confront him right then and there. Then there was the time at work. Jamie and Alice had some event or meeting. I wasn't sure, but they were both there, playing it all professional in front of everyone else. I watched from across the room, watching them flirt subtly, sharing inside jokes like they were in their own little world. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke on, but I kept my cool. I had to. I wasn't ready to make my move yet, but I would be soon, real soon. And while all of this was happening, Sarah and I kept growing closer. What started as emotional support became something more. It's funny how things work out, right? Here I was watching my marriage fall apart in front of my eyes, but at the same time, I was building something new with someone who actually gave a damn about me. One night, after a long, exhausting day of pretending everything was normal with Alice, Sarah invited me over for dinner. I could tell it was more than just a friendly invitation. We both knew where this was headed. And when I showed up at her place, there was no pretending anymore. The conversation flowed, the wine flowed, and before I knew it, I was in her bed. It wasn't just about sex. It was about everything that Alice wasn't anymore: warmth, care, affection. For the first time in a long time, I felt wanted. I felt alive. And yeah, maybe it was part of my revenge too. Maybe I needed that one thing Alice couldn't take away from me. Someone who actually gave a damn. Someone who was on my side. Sarah was all of that and more. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I kept gathering evidence. I knew where Alice and Jamie were going next. They had this trip planned, some bullshit work conference in another city. But now I had the details. The hotel. The dates. I knew exactly what they were up to, and when the time was right, I was going to drop the hammer on both of them. And Sarah? She'd be there with me, every step of the way. I'd been sitting on all that evidence for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. The texts, the photos, the videos, every dirty little secret Alice thought she was hiding from me was right there, stored in my phone, ready to blow her life apart. I thought about confronting her 100 times, just throwing it all in her face and watching her crumble, but that wasn't enough. She deserved worse. Much worse. The idea hit me one night while I was lying in bed, replaying everything in my head. I realized that destroying her wasn't just about the divorce or making her suffer financially. No, I wanted to destroy her reputation. I wanted everyone to know what kind of person she really was. The cheating, lying bitch who fucked her way through our marriage and thought she could get away with it. So I decided to take it all public. At first, it felt crazy. I mean, who does that, right? But then again, who installs cameras in their own house to catch their wife cheating? I was way past the point of normal. So, I spent the next few days carefully planning my revenge. I compiled everything: screenshots of the texts, photos of Alice and Jamie together, videos from the hidden cameras. I even included the receipts from their fancy dinners and hotel stays, anything that painted a clear picture of what was going on behind closed doors. When I was ready, I created anonymous accounts on a few social media platforms and some of those shady forums where people gossip about this kind of thing. I didn't just dump everything at once, though. That would have been too obvious. No, I wanted it to spread slowly, like a virus. So I started with the text, just a few, posted in a forum under the title, "Guess What My Wife Has Been Up To." I didn't even mention Alice's name. I just let the screenshots speak for themselves. At first, nothing happened. A few comments here and there. People calling her a slut, others sympathizing with the anonymous husband. It was almost anticlimactic. But then I dropped the bomb, the video. One clip, just a few seconds of Alice and Jamie in our bedroom, doing what they do best. I posted it with the caption, "Caught in the act." That's when things took off. The video spread faster than I ever imagined. It didn't take long for someone to recognize Alice. By the end of the day, her name was out there, and the comments were rolling in. People were tagging her friends, her colleagues. It was like watching a wildfire burn through her entire social circle. Slowly, but surely, the scandal started making its way to the people who actually mattered in her life. The next day, I saw the first cracks. Alice was on the phone when I got home from work, her face pale, her voice shaking. "What do you mean it's online?" she was saying, pacing back and forth in the kitchen. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening. Someone had sent her the video. Someone had seen the texts. The guilt was finally catching up to her. She hung up, her hands trembling, and I could see the panic in her eyes. She didn't even look at me. She went straight to her phone, scrolling through her messages, frantically checking her social media. Her whole life was starting to fall apart, and she had no idea I was behind it. Then the call started coming. First, it was her boss. I was in the next room when I heard her try to explain herself. "It's not what it looks like. I swear, I can explain." But what was she going to say? That it was all a misunderstanding? That she wasn't the woman in the video? It was pathetic, watching her try to salvage what little was left of her dignity. Over the next few days, things got worse for her. The scandal spread like wildfire through her workplace. Her colleagues started calling, asking questions, distancing themselves. People she thought were her friends were now avoiding her, unfollowing her on social media, pretending they didn't know her. And the best part? Jamie. The moment shit hit the fan, that coward distanced himself too. He didn't want any part of the mess. I remember overhearing one of their phone conversations. She was crying, practically begging him to stick by her side, but he wasn't having any of it. "Alice, I can't do this," he said. "I've got too much at stake. I can't be associated with this kind of thing." I almost laughed out loud. The guy was bailing on her, and it was glorious. Watching Alice's life crumble before my eyes. I won't lie, it felt good. Damn good. Every time she got another call, every time she checked her phone and saw another comment, another message from someone turning their back on her, I felt this surge of satisfaction. She was getting what she deserved. But I wasn't done. Not yet. As the scandal spread, Alice's job was on the line. It didn't take long for her boss to give her a warning. "We can't have this kind of behavior representing the company." And I knew it was only a matter of time before she'd be out of a job. She tried to fight it, of course. She went to HR, tried to play the victim card, but it didn't work. The evidence was too damning. It wasn't just rumors, it was cold, hard proof. The photos, the videos, the messages. No one could defend her, not even herself. The day she got fired, I knew. I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table, her head in her hands, sobbing. "They let me go," she whispered, barely looking up. "I lost my job." I didn't say anything. I just stood there, watching her fall apart. This woman who had destroyed our marriage, betrayed me in every possible way, was finally facing the consequences. And the best part? She still didn't know it was me who had pulled the strings. She thought it was just some random leak, some mistake that spiraled out of control. Jamie had already distanced himself. He was barely answering her calls, let alone coming around anymore. She was on her own, and she knew it. And me? I wasn't done yet. There was one more piece to the puzzle. One final move that would seal her fate for good. And when it came, there'd be no coming back for her. By the time Alice finally tried to talk to me, it was too late. The damage was done, and there was no going back. I'd watched her world crumble in front of me. Her job gone, her friends abandoning her one by one, and Jamie? He was long gone. He ditched her the moment the scandal broke wide open. She was alone, desperate, and finally, after all that, she came crawling back, looking for some kind of forgiveness. It was a pathetic sight. She sat me down in the living room one evening, tears in her eyes, and started with the usual bullshit. How she was sorry, how she never meant to hurt me, how she made a mistake. It was almost laughable. Here she was sitting across from me, trying to spin this narrative that it was all just some terrible misunderstanding, like the texts, the videos, the affair with Jamie. All of it could be erased with a few crocodile tears. She even tried to play the victim, saying how hard things had been at work and how stress made her do things she regretted. I almost walked out mid-sentence, but I stayed for one reason, to hear her beg. And beg she did. "Lucas, please, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You have to believe me." Her voice cracked as she reached for my hand. "We can work through this. We can—" I pulled my hand away before she could even touch me. The coldness in my voice surprised even me. "There's nothing to work through, Alice. It's over." I wasn't interested in her excuses. I wasn't interested in listening to her rewrite the story. I was done. I'd made up my mind the moment I saw Jamie walk into our bedroom weeks ago. Hell, probably even before that. There was no forgiveness, no second chances. She destroyed our marriage, and now she was going to lose everything else. When I told her I'd filed for divorce, she didn't take it well. She cried, pleaded, tried to guilt-trip me into rethinking it, but I didn't budge. It was over. I'd made sure that this divorce would be swift and brutal. I had everything I needed, the texts, the videos, all the receipts. I wasn't just going for a clean break. I was going to take everything. And she knew it. The legal process wasn't easy for her. She tried to fight me at first, of course, consulted several lawyers, tried to figure out some way to hold on to her share of our assets, but the evidence was stacked too high against her. I was one step ahead at every turn. Every time she thought she had a chance, I'd pull out more proof. In the courtroom, I laid it all out, methodically and without mercy. The judge barely had to deliberate. With all the evidence on my side, it was clear who the victim was here. She lost a significant portion of what we'd built together. Our shared property? Gone. The house? I kept it. Our savings? I made sure she got the smallest slice possible. I wasn't being petty. I was just making sure she felt every inch of this fallout. Meanwhile, Alice was scrambling, desperately trying to hold on to what little she had left. She reached out to friends for support, but no one wanted anything to do with her anymore. She was toxic, and everyone knew it. The few friends who hadn't already ghosted her gave her the cold shoulder after seeing the evidence for themselves. I'd made sure they saw it. I wasn't just ruining her life. I was erasing her from mine and from everyone else's too. The fallout with Jamie was just as satisfying. He didn't stick around for long after the scandal went viral. At first, he tried to downplay it, probably thinking it would all blow over. But when the pressure mounted and his reputation started taking a hit, he bailed. I overheard a few of their last phone conversations. Her crying, begging him to stand by her, to help her through the mess they'd both created. Him, cold, distant, telling her that he couldn't afford to get dragged down by this. He was looking out for himself, just like I knew he would. By the time the divorce was finalized, Alice had nothing left. No job, no friends, no future with Jamie. Just the shattered remains of the life she thought she could rebuild by screwing me over. But me? I was moving on. I bought a new house, something small but enough for me to start fresh. It was a symbol, a clean break from the past. Alice could keep the memories, the guilt, the mess she made. I didn't need any of it. I didn't want any of it. And through all of this, Sarah had been my rock. What started as her being there to listen, to support me emotionally, had grown into something real. She helped me cope with the stress of the divorce, reminding me that I wasn't the one who destroyed the marriage. I hadn't done anything wrong. Every time I felt the weight of everything coming down on me, Sarah was there, steady, reliable, reminding me that I deserved better. We'd spent more time together as the divorce dragged on. She'd come over after work, cook dinner, we'd talk about anything but Alice. It was like the storm that had been raging in my life had finally cleared, and Sarah was the calm that followed. I didn't think I'd be ready to start something new so soon, but with her, it just felt right. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about using her to hurt Alice. It was real. The day the divorce was finalized, Sarah and I celebrated. Nothing extravagant, Just a quiet evening at my new place, a bottle of wine, and the knowledge that I was finally free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, the mess that had been my marriage to Alice. Alice, on the other hand, tried reaching out to me a few times. I never responded. There was nothing left to say. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with them. She was alone, disgraced, and I'd moved on. And honestly, it felt good. It felt damn good. The day the divorce was finalized felt like stepping out of a long, dark tunnel. I remember standing outside the courthouse, the papers in my hand, staring at them for a second before tucking them away. It was finally over. The weight I'd been carrying for months, hell, maybe years, was gone. I was free from Alice, free from the lies, the cheating, the toxic mess our life had become. And I wasn't alone. Sarah was there with me, standing beside me, smiling in that quiet way of hers. She never said much about the whole divorce thing, never gloated or acted like this was some kind of victory for her. She just supported me through it all, kept me grounded when I felt like everything was spiraling out of control. That's when I knew it wasn't just some rebound thing between us. She was real, and she was here for the long haul. We decided it was time for a fresh start, staying in the same city, surrounded by the same memories, the same places that reminded me of Alice. It didn't make sense. So, Sarah and I made a plan. We packed up, found a new place in a different city, and within a few months, we were gone. Just like that, I'd left behind the ghost of my old life. No more Alice, no more drama, just a clean slate. Moving with Sarah felt like breathing again. We found this small but charming house. Nothing extravagant, but it was ours. Together, we settled into this new routine, something easy, something that actually felt peaceful. No more tension, no more waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was just life, simple and good. That's when I realized how much I'd been holding on to all that anger, all that pain from the past. But now, it was gone. I didn't feel bitter anymore. I didn't feel like I needed to constantly look over my shoulder, waiting for something to blow up. Alice was just a chapter that had ended, and I had finally closed the book. A few months into the move, I opened my own business. It was a small marketing firm, something I wanted to do for years but never had the chance or maybe the courage to actually go for. With Sarah's encouragement, I took the plunge. And it worked. Business was slow at first, sure, but it picked up steadily. It gave me a sense of purpose again, something to throw myself into that wasn't tainted by the mess of my past. We'd meet up with some of my old friends from time to time. They had seen me at my worst during the breakdown of my marriage, the endless anger, the sleepless nights. But now they saw me different. They saw someone who had come out the other side stronger, calmer. They met Sarah and loved her immediately. We all grabbed drinks one night, and I remember my buddy Jason pulling me aside, grinning like an idiot. "Man, you look happier than I've seen you in years," he said, clinking his beer against mine. "You did good." And yeah, I had to admit, he was right. I was happier. I had my life back, but more than that, I had something better. I had Sarah. I had a business that was taking off. I had a future that wasn't clouded by the bitterness and betrayal that had defined my marriage to Alice. As for Alice, she didn't fare so well. I'd hear things now and then. People talked. She tried to rebuild her life after the scandal, but her reputation was wrecked. The video, the messages, they were still out there, haunting her every step. She'd lost her job. Her friends had all but abandoned her. And Jamie? He was long gone. It didn't take long for him to completely cut ties with her once things got messy. She tried reaching out to her old colleagues, hoping to salvage some kind of career, but everywhere she turned, doors slammed shut. No one wanted to be associated with her anymore. There was one last time she tried to reach out to me. I wasn't surprised. Alice was desperate now, and desperate people do desperate things. She sent me this long email, pages of it, actually apologizing, talking about how much she regretted what happened, how she'd lost everything and had no one left. She wanted to meet up, talk things through, see if there was any way we could make peace. I stared at that email for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened between us. But in the end, I didn't even respond. There was no need. I didn't hate her anymore. I just didn't care. She was a part of my past, a chapter that was over, and I wasn't interested in reopening it. I deleted the email, blocked her, and that was the end of it. And honestly, it felt good. No, it felt great. Sarah and I settled into this new life like we'd been doing it for years. I'd wake up in the morning, have coffee with her before heading to the office, and everything just felt normal. I wasn't haunted by what Alice had done anymore. I wasn't holding on to that anger, that bitterness. It was all behind me now, and I was free. Some nights, Sarah and I would talk about the future, where we'd travel, what we wanted to do with our business, maybe even starting a family someday. It was all possible now. The weight of the past wasn't dragging me down anymore. I had a new beginning, and it was everything I never thought I'd have again. Alice? She was just a memory, a mistake I'd learned from, and that was all she'd ever be.